Welcome to Sparks of History, where Jewish history and world history meet. We are very honored and pleased to have with us today Rabbi Elchanan Shoff. Rabbi Shoff currently serves as the Rabbi, the Rav of BKLA, that's Beis Knesses of Los Angeles. And Rabbi Shoff also teaches at YULA Boys High School and YULA Girls High School, and additionally is a professor of Jewish philosophy and Judaic studies at Touro College of Los Angeles. Previously, Rabbi Shoff was a director of educational programming and a senior lecturer for Hineni international programs, as well as a lecturer for Torah in Israel. Rabbi Shoff received rabbinic ordination Semicha from rabbis Weinberg and Rabbi Zalman Nehemia Goldberg. Additionally, Rabbi Shoff has authored a number of books, including Vaani, Bahashem, Atzapeh, a commentary on Tehillim, Birchasa, Vishirasa, which is a commentary on a Mesechet tractate Brachos, as well as Paradise, Breathtaking Strolls through the length and breadth of Torah. Rabbi Shoff, thank you for being with us. We appreciate it very much.
I'm so happy to be here with you, and thank you for this wonderful opportunity.
Thank you. Today we're going to try to get a perspective, a Jewish perspective on rabbis, teachers, family, and friends, looking at the present versus the past. So there's Torah in here, there's Judaism in there, there's some history in there, and we'll really look forward to getting Rabbi Shoff's perspective on this. Starting off, what is the significance of the teaching in Pirkei Avot, Ethics of the Father, which teaches us, make for yourself a rabbi, acquire for yourself a friend? And how does that help a person when they're developing relationships?
That's a really important Mishnah. The immortal words of Rabbi Yehoshua ben Prachia are recorded in the beginning of Pirkei Avot, where he tells us that he actually says three things. He says, Aseh lecha rav, make for yourself a rabbi, a teacher. Knei lecha chaver, acquire for yourself a friend. And judge every person lekav zechut, favorably. Those are the three things that he said sort of in one pithy statement. And one observation is that he's sort of describing to us how we navigate within society. Some people are meant to be above us. There are people we can learn from. There are people that we can gain from as a teacher. They're more knowledgeable. They can give us direction. And that's a Aseh lecha rav. You need to put somebody in your life above you who can come on over and say, hey, listen, you got to improve this. You got to grow here. Generally, if somebody comes up to me in the street and starts giving me criticism, my immediate reaction might be, well, who are you? What right do you have to start telling me what to do? And so the simple understanding is you need to empower somebody, or Aseh lecha rav, take somebody in your life who's a rav, who's bigger than you. That's literally what the word means, who will teach you and come over to you and say, hey, listen, you need to improve this. Knei lecha chaver is then people that are at a similar, level to you. They're your friend. They're your companion. They're not above you or below you. Acquire a friend. And the third thing is to judge everyone favorably, would sound like it must be talking about people who you might otherwise judge poorly. So you consider them to perhaps be less, observant or refined, or whatever your metric is, whether it's religious, social, moral, or, academic. Judge them favorably. See the positive in them. See the good in them. So I think that this Mishnah in general is describing the way that we navigate our lives within society, within relationships, and how important it is to mindfully and carefully acquire those friendships, empower those people to be our rabbanim, and have the influence. Judging favorably is the key to dealing with people who we might otherwise disdain or look down upon if we were unrefined. I think that's a clear summary of the Mishnah, and I think it's something that could be expanded upon endlessly. So if you have, any specific direction we want to go in this conversation, I think this is a great first question.
So the phrase, the specific phrase of acquiring a friend. What does that specific term teach us about the nature of friendship relationships?
There's a verse in the Torah where God says to Moshe, Kach lecha es Yehoshua. Take for yourself Joshua. So Moshe is told to take Yoshua for himself. And the Midrash tells us the following interpretation. The language is, Lefi she'ein chaver nikna ela bekoshe kishin. A friend is only acquired in the most difficult of circumstances. It's very, very difficult to acquire a friend. Mikan. And we understand from here that God was telling Moshe to acquire Yoshua as a friend. Mikan Amru, from here we learn, Yikne Adam Chaver La'atzmo. A person should acquire a friend for himself for the following purpose: Lihiyot Koreh Imo, to study Torah with him. Vishoneh Imo, study the Mishnah with him. Ve'ochel Vishoseh Imo, he should eat with him and drink with him. Umigale lo sisarav, and he should reveal to him his secrets. So, in other words, acquiring a friend is difficult. It requires attention. It requires focus. It takes an expense. Sometimes that expense might be financial. If necessary, you have to buy somebody gifts. You have to win them over. I mean, just like if a person is lahavdil, it's a little different when you're making a friend than when you're dating somebody for marriage. But it can be expensive. You buy presents and you invest your time and energy and focus. You also, as you get a little busier in life, when you're a child, friendship is something that's the most important part of a person's experience. As a person gets busier, they have children, they have work, they need a certain amount of time for leisure, for exercise. And the idea of investing time and energy into creating friendship, creating community, and specifically individual friendships is something that many people just don't feel that the opportunity cost is worthwhile. And the Mishnah is saying it's worthwhile. It's absolutely necessary. Strong friendships, meaningful connections are required for Moshe Rabbeinu. This is the ultimate Gadol Hador, sitting and studying Torah. He has a close relationship with God, and he needs to reveal his secrets to someone. He needs somebody he can eat and drink with, that he can be comfortable with. It is astonishing how few people have that friend. It is far less common. Someone who feels I can reveal anything to this person and they will still love me and appreciate me and value me. And the Mishnah says it's critical for a person's experience in this lifetime. So Aseh L'Charav is really something that a person can do, even if the rabbi is just giving public lectures. The Tiferes Yisrael, in his comments on the Mishnah, says something sort of parenthetically, but he says it doesn't say make a rabbi for your shul or for your ircha, for your city. It says, the nature of people sometimes is that when the rabbi is talking and he says, everybody needs to come to shul on time. So this guy who came only 5 minutes late looks at the person who came a half hour late and says, what a bunch of bums. I'm glad the rabbi's telling these people what to do. Very rarely do we think he's talking straight to me, unless he's giving compliments. So Aseh L'Charav means take to heart for yourself. It's something that can very much be done, even if the rabbi himself doesn't see you as his primary student in the world. But friendship is challenging because it requires scoping out the right person who's willing to be invested just as much. And it requires a lot of attention and a lot of drive and a lot of push. And it's an important Jewish value. It's not some sort of luxury. It's a mitzvah.
And this is obviously something that it really doesn't depend on age. Many people have best friends when they're younger, and then they become distant from them, and it's very hard to find another best friend. But I'm assuming that the teaching here is it doesn't make a difference what age you are. It's never too late. It's something that you have to work on because it's that important.
That's an excellent observation. It doesn't say for children. And importantly, it doesn't say you need to have many, many friends. In other words, one will do the trick. One good friend. And what my Rosh Yeshiva, when I learned in Yeshiva in Waterbury, Rabbi Aaron Kaufman, so he would often say that a person who has hundreds of friends, those aren't necessarily friends. That's not, those are acquaintances, those are buddies. He says a true friend, you get a few of them over the course of a lifetime if you're lucky. A real friend. And that always stuck with me when he said that. It was a very deep thing. That because we were in a yeshiva that had tremendous achdus, and there was 150 bachrim at the time that he taught this, I think. And we all felt that we were good friends, and there was a lot of truth to that. But a real friend, you find a handful in a lifetime, and they're precious.
And the idea of acquiring a friend, it's not one spouse. A spouse as a friend, it's a whole different relationship. Would be the teaching of Pirkei Avot.
I imagine so. It seems to me that every relationship, it's not that a person's spouse. We say in the blessing at a wedding, the bracha, we say we bless the couple with ahava, love, and achva, which is familial relationship, brotherhood, shalom, peace, vireus. Now, reus is a word for friendship. This word is chaver. It's a little bit different. But there are psukim even in Malachi, I think, where it says, "Hi chavertecha ve'eshes brisecha." A wife is called a friend. So that there's certainly an aspect of friendship that exists between a couple. On the other hand, I think it's always important that every relationship has its unique character. And one can also have friendship between a parent and a child, but you're not friends. You're a parent and child. And that doesn't belittle them. It doesn't mean I don't like you or don't get along with you. I think people get enormous pleasure out of spending time with their children. When their children are adult children, it can be very much a sort of friendship in a certain way. And that's amazing. The joy that people get from that is indescribable. But it's different because it's a parent, and you can only find one set of parents in your lifetime. And also a spouse is a very different thing. So I think that having a friend who isn't your spouse and who isn't your parent is what this mission is talking about. In other words, I don't mean to say you shouldn't be friends with your spouse, or even when people say you shouldn't be friends with your children, I'm unsure if that's the case, but you shouldn't be merely friends, at least with your children. It has to be the additional aspect of the parenthood.
Going back to rabbis, teachers, and mentors, in early generations, what role did those figures play in Jewish communities? And how, Rabbi Shoff, do you think that that role has evolved in the more modern times that we live in today?
It's a very, very fascinating question. I'll tell you why it's so significant. Um, in our times, our communities are so radically different than they used to be. And for that reason, people have tremendously different needs when they come to an elementary school, a high school, a yeshiva, or a shul. So just as an example of this might be, when you have a child who was raised in a Jewish community, in the old world, in theory at least, if there was tremendous warmth and positivity and good Jewish identity and values, the home did a good job of imparting positivity surrounding Judaism. So if that child would then sit in the classroom with a very strict teacher who would say, "You look inside, or I'm going to give you a little hit on the hand with the ruler," my impression is it didn't do the same level of damage to that person who was otherwise very happy. He understood I have a strict teacher. But when that person is the single person representing Judaism in this child's life, it's a very different influence when they say, "Oh, rabbis are mean people. They just want to beat you up because you didn't look at the verse or something." And even though sometimes those methods are still effective, a math teacher who teaches the children math and they all get 100% on the test, but they walk out hating math, has done her job. I mean, she's taught them what they need to know. They're ready to go to university. Those who are going to love math will love math. But if we teach people Torah and they walk out miserable and hating Judaism and they got 100 on all the tests, but it's boring to them, it's a subject, we failed. And I think that sometimes we can forget. I've heard even educators sometimes say, "Well, that's a parent's job." But we wouldn't say that if we worked in an orphanage. We wouldn't say, "Well, there are no parents. These are orphans." Unfortunately, we live in a society where very often this is it. If they're there in the shul, this is where they're going to get their Judaism from. If they're there in the yeshiva, and this is very, very common. I'm not sure when I say we, I'm speaking about the United States. I don't even know that this can be said to be true for every neighborhood in the United States. I imagine that New Square, one of the beautiful square Hasidim, has a whole different dynamic, and Yerushalayim and Beit Shemesh and all over the world. But I think as a broad principle, people used to get married young, and they would live in a little courtyard with their families. And a girl who was getting married young but was living with all her aunts, and they were cooking together and they were doing laundry together. It's very different than today. So having communities and rabbis and mentors is much more of a process today that needs to be done mindfully, because it doesn't happen automatically in the way that it often did throughout Jewish history. I would even say like a good example of this is when we look at the process of conversion to Judaism. It's like a good example. In the old days, Talmudic times, through the times of the Rishonim, Rambam codifies this, and even the Shulchan Aruch describes that when a person comes and decides that they want to convert, we ask them a series of questions in that first meeting. And if they are deemed to be sincere, we convert them very, very quickly. And then after they've converted, we start teaching them how to keep Torah and mitzvahs, kosher and other things, to the point that the Gemara offers an example of a person who converted and didn't know any of the rules of Shabbos. They didn't know how to keep the Sabbath. Now, nowadays, if somebody wants to convert to Orthodox Judaism, it's a couple of years where they have to learn everything, and they have to, spend time in Jewish communities and in people's homes and make sure they know what they're getting themselves into. And it's like an interesting question. Why is that? So Rabbi Yerachmiel Fried has a monumental sefer called Emes V'Tzedek that came out in the last couple of years on all the laws of conversion. And one of the things he expresses in there is that in the old days, when a person would convert to Judaism, they then lived among Jews. They were only in kosher kitchens from then on. That was it. They'll learn all the blessings. But nowadays, a person who converts to Judaism may only see other Orthodox Jews on Shabbat in the synagogue, maybe Shabbat morning. In other words, it's a whole different society. And for them to ever learn and involve themselves in that lifestyle, in that community, requires an enormous amount of attention and focus. And for that reason, we had to sort of adjust how we initiate people into this beautiful lifestyle in a healthy way, because it's a whole different world. And I think that that's emblematic of almost everything. We need to really realize that if a person doesn't invest themselves in being part of a community, and having, the leadership that comes with that and the support that comes with that, they won't necessarily have it. And that wasn't true. It wasn't true in most of Jewish society. Historically, as it seems to me in any way, but it certainly is true now that it's a tremendous focus. People who don't have it feel very bad. They often say, I feel like here in Los Angeles, I'll hear people sometimes say, it's such a big Jewish community, but I don't know that I have community. And oftentimes I'll say to that person, like, okay, where do you daven on Shabbos? And say, well, I hop around. If you'd go to the same place for 3 months, for 12 Shabbos in a row, and you'd sit there and you'd talk to the people and you'd stay for Kiddush, and you'd feel a much stronger sense of community. It says, yeah, but I wake up different times. I don't know. Yeah, it's an investment. But if you don't do it, it's not going to happen by itself necessarily.
So is it these changes are a result of what primary factors? Is it that society was more closed then and society is now more open? Society then, the Jews had less freedoms, and today in the United States and elsewhere, Jews have more freedoms. Society then, an authority was an authority. You listen to the rabbi, you listen to your parents, and that was that. And now is that what's playing that changes the whole dynamic, or is it something else at play?
Listen, you know what? It's humans are not lab rats, so it's so hard sometimes to just isolate the reason. I think what you said is all true, meaning I think that both of those reasons are like well thought out. Yeah, Jews were stuck in the ghetto, and you couldn't intermarry, and you couldn't go to university, and you couldn't leave that bubble. I think another thing is that we really needed people much more. You'd lived in a society where, like, just in a little village, there was one carpenter and there was one person, one or two people selling eggs, and one dairy farmer, one water carrier. In the bigger cities, I imagine that it had its own dynamic. It was different to live in a little village than it might be to have lived in Warsaw or something. But even so, when you just look at how people lived nowadays, you really don't need to see anybody. You can order your groceries at home, and you can really get into your own little cave, and be fully taken care of by a beautiful functioning society. without the human element, without the human part of it. So you're getting the benefits of thousands of people who are working together to get you bread and milk and t-shirts delivered to your home and anything else you need. And yet you can have, touchless delivery where it's left by your door and nobody sees you, contactless delivery. And I think that another thing to understand about this, all of this, is that this is a very religious issue. It's not just a mental health or an emotional issue, because growth is always relationship based. In other words, we connect to Hashem, to God, through the Masorah, through our teachers and our relationships. In fact, the Talmud even says, how can a person connect to God? He is a consuming fire. In other words, it's a very abstract concept. Religion is something that can often consume people and remove them from the world. And how does one connect to spirituality in a less than abstract statement? And the Talmud says you attach to wise people and to their students. You eat and drink with them. That's how it's done. You do business with them. You do them favors. It's very much in the financial and physical. In terms of relationships, we connect to one another. There's a book called The Heart of Parenting by Rabbi Moshe Dan Kestenbaum, published by Touro U'Masorah. It's a beautiful, slim volume with all kinds of good things in it. One thing that he said in there that always struck me, since I read it, I must have said it over 100 times to my students, in my shul, and anybody who will listen. He says that when I play basketball with my son, he says, I'm definitely doing a mitzvah. But when I learn Torah with him, I'm never sure if I am. And he says, why is that? He says, because the Torah is teaching that when a parent has a good relationship with their child, and he builds this idea that that's going to be the greatest vehicle to bring that child to have a great relationship with God. And when I play basketball with my child, he's happy and he sees that I love him and I'm building a relationship with him. He says, when I learn Torah with him, my hope is that he's enjoying it. But if I pick the wrong time and it's Shabbos afternoon and my kid just wants to be out with his friends and I'm sitting him down and he's building resentment when I don't even realize, then it could be I'm alienating him from the big picture here. So that the relationship that I'm building is the primary vehicle to bring someone close to God. And we see that certainly when it comes to outreach, that it's often much less about the specific piece of information that I impart than it is the strong and meaningful relationships that are built between the outreach rabbi or rebbitzin or layperson and the person that they're meeting with. Very often, the person will strike up a new relationship and say, but I'm afraid to learn with this new initiate because I don't have the answers to all of their questions. And I always try to remind people that just telling them, that's a great question. I don't know. I'll find out the answer. I'll look into it, right? Let me think about it. That's all people usually need. They're not necessarily coming to us for all the answers, but that relationship is so significant. And so I think that Aseh Lecha Rav and Knei Lecha Chaver and these sort of relationships, they're not just, luxuries of here's a nice way to have a good life. Here's a good way to get advice when you need things. And I think that they're critical to the transmission of Torah, to the fulfillment of Torah. We daven with a minyan. It's not just about getting 10 bodies in the room. I believe there's a Radvaz in the Shilas Teshuvos Radvaz. This is 15th, 16th century. And he writes that when a person goes to shul and they see their rabbi, their rebbe who loves them, and they see people around them, he describes the emotional experience of praying with people who you love. That is part of the concept that it's supposed to be of davening with a minyan. And that's better. It's better to go to a place where you enjoy the people's company, where you appreciate them, where you love them and have warm feelings towards them, than it is to simply find, no, the halacha is to get 10 men in a room and pray. Listen, that is valuable. So I think that highlighting that this is to me, this is a very religious issue and it's a very spiritual issue. Having shuls that are friendly and warm, a shul that will have a kiddush where people sit down, talk about Torah, talk about life, enjoy each other's company, can sometimes be seen as, look, if you need that, okay, whatever, you're weird. Like, I guess you need social contact, but like, I need to pray and I need to get home to my family. In my opinion, this is a value that is sometimes overlooked a little bit. How important it can be to create those relationships in a healthy way.
You had mentioned before, Rabbi Shoff, the extended family. And obviously in times of yore, the grandparents, the bubbies, the zaidi, the aunts, the uncles, the cousins, everybody was mished together in a smaller communities. Um, how has that changed? How do you bring that back if it should be brought back? Um, what are your thoughts on that?
You know, it's such a difficult thing. We are blessed. My wife is one of eight siblings. I came from a little bit of a smaller family, but you know, when there are simchas around the globe, um, we try so much to extend ourselves to make sure our children can be there. When you have a bar mitzvah and it's over a Shabbos and all the little cousins are running around, and it's such a powerful time of connection and the memories that are created, the relationships. We try very hard to visit Israel every year because, we're blessed with three siblings there and all their children. It's my children's cousins. And the way I express it to my children and my family is that I'm not a Rothschild or a Gates. We don't the Yerusha that we have, that you were born into, was not necessarily financial riches at that level. But I mean, thank God, Hashem takes good care of us. But um, the Yerusha that you have is these amazing aunts and uncles and cousins who love you and care about you. And we got to know them. We got to be part of their lives. And if I have to extend myself a little bit to try to take off a little more time and spend a little more money, it's such a significant thing to be invested in because ultimately they'll be there for you. Who your friends are in sixth grade or seventh grade, or this all changes, but your family doesn't change. They're your family, and they will love you in a way that others won't, and they'll have your back in a way that others won't. And so I definitely feel that nowadays, when it's not such a given, it requires a lot of extending yourself, a lot of investment. Try to be there. It's not a luxury. It's it's such a basic thing that for some people it's not financially practical, or for other reasons they can't travel. But even then, investing the attention in let's make sure these little cousins get on the phone or get on a Zoom call, so that they know each other, and they don't hit 18 years old and they're just meeting for the first time. Um, I remember once in yeshiva, there was a family that I was sitting with a boy on the first day of yeshiva who I'd known from the year before, and a new boy walked in the room, and the guy says, "Oh, that's my cousin." So I said to him, I said, "Go say hi." He's like, "Oh, I've never met him. I've only seen him." So I said, "Why not?" So apparently their parents had been in some financial disagreement or some kind of story like this, and they hadn't spoken in many years. So what I did at the time was very impulsive. I was 19, 20. I grabbed my friend and I just ran over. I grabbed his arm and he was kind of pulling back, but he didn't put up much of a fight. Ran over to the other boy and said to him, like, "You guys are cousins, right?" And then I'd pushed them into an embrace, like into a hug. And they hugged each other for a couple of minutes. Both of them told me independently that when they told their parents that like they're in yeshiva with the cousin and they met and they're getting along, um, they their parents were overjoyed. In other words, even when people have disagreements with one another, ultimately, if those parents were overjoyed that their kids were getting along and had met each other in yeshiva, then they kind of regretted where this relationship had gotten to. So I think that we need to extend ourselves to be forgiving. We need to extend ourselves to make these relationships work. They're very, very important. So that's one perspective. I really think that it's a value. Being family oriented is very much a part of the Torah's ideals. There is, by the way, when Abraham extends himself to go save Lot and goes to war against the kings in the local area because Lot was captured, there is a Ralbag, Gersonides, in his commentaries on Chumash, where he says that this is to teach us the lesson. The Torah includes this to teach us the lesson that a person should extend themselves for their family. You have to go out of your way. And I think that another angle, aside from making sure that our children are connected and that we're connected, is the level of influence that we can have. If you've got a niece or a nephew, right, which I think the word for both of them is nibblings. That's actually a real word. So if you've got any nibblings out there, so one day they may need somebody. They may need someone for advice or for help. Or do they know that they can come to you? Do they know that I've got an uncle who cares about me? I mean, the possibility of being that influence and that person in the lives of our family is extremely available. It doesn't take too much. It just takes looking at the kid and saying, "You're a great niece and nephew. You know, you're a great." My father-in-law is great at this. He says to every one of them, and it's like a joke, but he says to every one of his nieces and nephews always, "My favorite niece, my favorite nephew, my favorite cousin." He always says that, and I've heard from so many of them when they tell me, like, I think I might really be his favorite one. Um, and it's a big family, thank God. But that attitude of if you need something, you come to me because I care about you and I'm there for you. I'm happy with you're raising some money for your school. So maybe I can only send $18, but of course I'll be the first one to send. Of course you should reach out to me. I can only send 5 or I can't send anything. That relationship is so significant because we can really, really make a difference in the lives of people who sometimes the parent isn't the person that that a troubled teen wants to go to. But when there is an aunt, an uncle, someone else within the family, so I really do think that nowadays it's not a given, but that is a responsibility of a good Jewish, person, is to let them know I'm there for you. I love you. I care about you. I appreciate you. I kind of know what's going on in your life. I could say more or less how old you are, what grade you're in, what you're doing. It's on my radar. You matter to me. I think that would be the two angles that I see. Make sure we really stay connected and take it as a religious responsibility, as a requirement. This is my great moral opportunity.
So, how in today's society, one phenomenon is kids leaving the house at an early age, right? Kids want their independence. They're on their own. They're single. They're not living at home. They're out of the house. But a contrary phenomenon is when you have married kids who, for financial reasons, move back to their parents, which I understand is something that does happen, at least on occasion. So you have that, and then you also have the whole trend, obviously, of longevity, which is a great thing. But now you've got parents who either you need to take care of your parents, maybe you have to bring them into your house, next to your house. How do you make sure that these situations don't become burdens, but rather is part of what you're saying here, what we have to come back to?
It's a great point because the Torah does speak out that a person should leave his father and mother behind and cleave to his wife. So certainly the ideal situation is for people to have their own dalaramos, and people to have their own territory, their own space, and from that space to be connecting to one another. Um, People need to be able to shut the door sometimes and have some space for themselves, and then it's a meaningful connection. But at the same time, the sense of responsibility within community, especially to our own family, has always been an important value, and I think that we can't forget about that. There was a study years ago. I haven't looked at it in years. You made me think of this. Called the radius of trust. That's what it was called. People can look this up. And the theory, as I recall, was that people who only trust a few close, relatives often have a very intense level of trust for those people. The more people that you trust, the less intense it gets. So I think one of the examples given was like a mafia don or something. They tell the story of the father who's a mafia boss, and he puts his like 5-year-old son up on a ledge, and he says, come here, Tony, jump to Papa. So I'll catch you. Don't worry, I'll catch you. And the kid jumps off this ledge, and the father lets him fall, and he gets a bloody nose and scrapes his knee. And he says, "What happened?" He says, "Let this be a lesson. Never trust anybody." And the people who they do trust, it's an extremely intense bond, but it's only a handful of people. And this sociological theory was meant to describe why it is that in some places, some societies, nobody would ever put a loved one in a nursing home. It would never happen. And that it was interesting. It was like in the Jewish community, like we build these moshavs, the kingdoms, these old person homes, and that's just in a society where you've really learned to trust a lot of people. You can be often learn to be very, very trusting. So I can't trust anyone else with my mother. Well, I can. I can put them in this home. The problem is that, as we know, oftentimes there can be a tremendous loss of dignity when you just drop somebody off. And we can forget. We can forget that it's not always the wisest thing to just be overly trusting of everyone and everything. We learn this in our schools, we have to sometimes protect our children more carefully, um, from predatory things or abusive things. As much as it's a great value to be a trusting person, when you trust people, you can put your money in the bank instead of having to hide it under your pillow. And that builds societies, it builds economies. There's so much value in the muscle of trusting. But at the same time, we have to remember this is really our responsibility. It really is our responsibility. I have a magnificent example in my life where my older sister and her husband, um, so both my parents and his parents require a lot of attention in terms of, they're older, they're not well. And the way that it's just a basic responsibility, the same way you would take care of your children, the way they devote themselves to this is the basic Jewish value. I even saw in one of the Mefarshim once where it says, honor your father and mother in order that you live a long life. So one of the basic Mefarshim on the text says that when children see their parents honoring their parents, then they inculcate that value and they realize that when the time comes, of course, I would take care of my parents, which indeed my mother did magnificently when she took care of her parents. And now that she's older and she's being taken care of by her children, it's really my sisters and her husband who do so much. But it's a powerful thing. You will live longer because of these societal bonds. It's better for society. It's better for us, and it's our responsibility. Reb Chaim Kanievsky, there's a sefer called Dudoi Ruvain on the laws of Kibbutz Avim, Belsky, and he says in there that he quotes from Chaim Kanievsky, who was asked, at what stage can you put your parent in a home? And he says as follows. He says, Reb Chaim said that the reason we do Kibbutz Avim, the responsibility, not necessarily the reasons in the Torah, but he says the feeling is they did all of these things for me when I was a baby. And now it's my responsibility in their time of need to care for them. So he says, at the same stage that a parent would say, I really can't care for this child, I'll put them in a home. It's only at that stage that a child could say about the parent. And that hit me very hard because this is our job. This is our responsibility. They would do anything for us. They loved us so much. And they love us so much. And that's our responsibility towards them. So I certainly think that the sense of obligation and responsibility, I guess, is the key here. Towards parents, even towards our children. They're our children and we love them. And if they need our help, they can come to us if we can help them. And that's a very, very important idea that we're responsible people, we're giving people, and we care. And if I can help my family, then of course I'm going to help my family. And I think that's critical. How we maintain practically those boundaries is so specific and nuanced to each situation, and it's a tremendous requirement. I mean, I would say even without talking about children moving in and parents moving in, there's one last thing I want to say. Every so often you meet, a couple with, 7, 8 beautiful children, and they now call one another Abba and Ima. They don't refer to one another anymore. In other words, sometimes you get the sense that they've lost their identity as a loving couple, right? And they've become people who are co-parenting or something, that they're parents to these children, which is true. It's very important for us to remember that in life we have multiple roles. And we're parents to these children, and in that role we are indeed Abba and Ima, daddy and mommy. But we're also a loving couple who's in a romantic relationship and care about one another. And that's something that also needs to be nurtured with attention and time and date nights and whatever the methodology is. The same exact thing would become true when people are busy caring for parents or children. That can't become the only thing in your life. You also have to have this family with your children. And you also have to have these relationships and these things. And that level of focus is very demanding. But you know what? These things are always expensive.
Is the importance of community and belonging to community and feeling part of a community the argument that out of town is preferable to in town? Is that true, or is the argument you're making, or the principle you're saying is that it really doesn't make a difference? Maybe it's easier out of town because you have no choice, but it's all about the importance and the effort that you put into these important values.
That's right. In other words, for some people, it is much easier out of town. um, because it's very, very important for a person to be needed. Young people in Los Angeles often ask me, as a rabbi of sort of young couples, it's very expensive to buy a home here, it's expensive to live here. And a lot of people are thinking all the time about moving to Las Vegas and to Phoenix and to Dallas and Houston and other places that are kind of a little bit, they're nearby enough that you feel like you can get home easily. You can drive sometime. And the question is, how do I make that determination? And I really believe that what most people are thinking about often is, what is in it for me? If I go there, do I have what I need in that community? Do I have a mikvah? Do I have the schools that my children will be happy in? Is there a shul for me? Can I get a home at an affordable price? And those are important considerations in life. I think the primary consideration is supposed to be, what can I contribute? There is a teaching. It's brought in the Menorahs HaMor from Rabbeinu Yonah. It may go back even further, but it's learned from Abraham Avinu that after Sodom was destroyed, he moved, because a person is obligated to move to a place where they can host guests. And the way I understand that is as a broader concept as well, that when you're thinking about where to live, it's, where can I be a meaningful person to contribute to this community and this society? And for some people, just being the 10th man who will come to a weekday minyan is a massive contribution. That's not going to happen in Borough Park. You're not probably not going to be needed for that. But if a person can find a way in their community that they're useful, they're meaningful, they're contributing to the people around them, that is a key sense of where they'll find community. And oftentimes in an out-of-town place, for many people, that's very, very useful. Rabbi Berkowitz Shlita would often tell young American Kolol men and their wives that moving to an out-of-town place in America might be better for them and their family than staying in Israel, in the sense that in Israel, this guy's going to sort of be in the back of the shul. But when he goes to an out-of-town place, he's needed, and he's the rabbi, and his children see him a certain way. And he's not any more learned than he would be if he was in Jerusalem, where everybody around him knows Shas, in this little B'nai Yeshivas or something. But because he's in a place where he's needed, and it pushes him to grow, and it gives him a certain identity, and it becomes so healthy for that family. So in our own way, we all need to kind of find that. A big part of finding community is not just the friendships and the things community brings me, but when I can figure out what can I do, what can my family do together to influence this community and make the world a better place, that is fulfilling the lesson of Avram Avinu, that we don't live simply for ourselves. It's, you're sitting at the door of your tent saying, how can I influence the world? How can I have some guests? How can I make a difference? And I think that for that reason, a person doesn't need to prefer out of town necessarily or anything, if they see that there's a place for them. But sometimes a person feels there just isn't a place for me to have my influence here, but in that other place or in the other thing, that's very, very significant. And I think in many ways, that's the lesson of Avraham Avinu.
Ask not what your community can do for you, ask what you can do for your community, to paraphrase.
Beautiful.
Okay. Just California, Los Angeles, massive, massive city, diverse Jewish population. How do you create a Los Angeles Jewish community? You must have, I don't know, what, hundreds and hundreds of synagogues, hundreds of, synagogues, all different. The argument being that everybody needs a different type of place. Or is the argument, really there's too many synagogues. Well, we should have larger synagogues that would create more community among different parts of Los Angeles, as an example. Where do you see it?
I once heard a wise thing from a colleague. He said that it says in the pasuk that Abraham says to Lot, he says, you go to the right and I'll go to the left because we're brothers. So the question is, what was that statement? And he said, when two people are brothers, they really feel like brothers. One can go here and one can go there, and it works nicely because they love each other. They're brothers. And I think that the idea that we have to be more similar in order to create unity, or that we have to pray in the same shul or the same nusach, is a misunderstanding. I think that unity is a very, very important thing. And when there are people across the aisle from us on something Jewish, um, do we love them like crazy? Are we connected to them? Yeah, but this one's further to the left and this one's further to the right. Avram says, you can be to the left and I can be to the right. He was talking geographically, but if we're brothers, it's a very, very significant thing. I saw a magnificent story um, the other day from Rav Kook of blessed memory. It's in the Moadei Re'ayah, and it says it's like a beautiful story that it was Rosh Hashanah one year before the founding of the states. Um, there was some people that were building on Rosh Hashanah, Jewish builders, not observant, and people were upset in this neighborhood. And Rav Kook knew about it. He sent somebody to blow shofar for them. That's all he did. And somebody showed up at this construction site and said, the Rav asked if you guys would indulge me for 5 minutes, and I'll say the bracha and blow the shofar. So of course, people, okay, listen, it's a break from construction. And the people came down and stood respectfully, and many of them began to cry. Many of them began to remember their childhoods and all the different, and they didn't go back to building that day. That was the story. And the idea that, when you want to unify people, we don't have to just love and connection. And, a lot of times if somebody says the wrong thing or does the wrong thing nowadays, the culture is you're now canceled. There's nothing of value to you anymore because I so strongly disagree with you about what you said about this or that or the next thing. You're dead. And unfortunately, that can penetrate the Torah world too sometimes. We can feel that, no, it's a big mistake. I don't think that there's a reason we all need to pray in the same shul. I don't think we all need to pray the same nusach. I think we need to keep our hearts open. It's very difficult when we talk about the values of community. I guess I'm generally thinking about smaller groups, friendships, places where the people, where you're combined with a certain set of goals and things for your children but at the same time, as a larger Jewish community, we talk about Los Angeles or the United States or world Jewry. That's also a form of identity and community. And I don't think it's the main focus of the subject we were talking about until now. I think it's a separate subject, but I think it's very critical. And as small and individual families, we get to have our own identity as a family, and that family is within a community, and that community is within Am Yisrael. And I definitely would say that we need a lot of focus on taking tremendous pride in our customs and our community, our shul, our identity, our home. And it does not have to be at the expense of everybody else's wrong, wicked, and evil. It just doesn't have to be that way. And it's not true. We're not at odds with everybody else. So I think that's a tremendous concept. I wish someone knew how to just snap their fingers and bring achdus in Klal Yisrael, bring unity to all of us, because we're told that that's what's almost the one thing that's in the way of Jews reaching their potential and bringing the redemption and really being where they should be. So I wish I had the answer, but I definitely don't think the solution is to try to homogenize people and push them all into the same shuls or into the same, let's everyone dress the same and everybody act the same. And that's not shalom, that's conformity. Shalom is when I can go to the right and you can go to the left, and we live with peace and understanding and real sincere love for the other person.
I guess our bracha is that we should all see that and all be a part of it as you are in Los Angeles and all the great work that you do. Any final thoughts on the subject?
Yes. I would say that my final thought is this. There was once a cartoon, like a newspaper cartoon that I saw some years ago, where it showed a funeral home, and there were maybe 3 people there. And this person is saying, so I'm surprised that so few people came to the funeral because he had 14,000 Facebook friends. And it was very striking to me. A lot of times today, the sense of community that people can develop for themselves in the online world and in all kinds of other, it's fictitious. It's not real. It doesn't meet those emotional needs that we have. We have these very real. We are social creatures. Human beings were built, ha'adam midiniyi b'teva is the language that I've seen in the Rambam and other Rishonim. People are built to be societal creatures. And I think that being aware of that and understanding that we really need this. It's a great gift that we give to another person when we extend friendship and warmth, and love to them. So I think that that's a very, very important thing to consider and to keep in mind, that this is our responsibility for ourselves to keep ourselves healthy. It's our responsibility to foster these things for our children. I mean, our children aren't expected to buy clothing for themselves. We don't expect them to go find their own rabbi. We enroll them in schools and we hire them tutors. Well, we have to help find them friends. That's an attention that a person needs. And sometimes there's this, I don't have the energy. Let them figure it out. Well, no, it takes a lot of attention. And sometimes you see, this is a good child in their class that would be helpful. Like, take them out together for a slice of pizza. I mean, it's going to take you time. It's going to take you attention, but it's really our responsibility to foster these things. It's something we can give others that is so meaningful. The Gemara says that lavein shinayim nechala, that smiling at another person is even greater than giving them a drink of milk, which is nourishing for a person who's hungry, thirsty on a hot day, and you give them some milk. And so meeting somebody's physical needs is a great mitzvah, but smiling at a person is even bigger because it meets an emotional need. No one else can do. When you give it, you and I each give $1 to charity. I mean, it might be harder for me and easier for you, or vice versa, but it's the same dollar. But when I smile at someone, no one else in the world can be me. Nobody else can give them that kindness and that appreciation. And if you've ever been in a room where only one person hates your living guts, I've been there. So it's very unpleasant. There can be 100 people who love you. There's one person shooting daggers at you. It's very painful. And I think the last thing is, I've, over the years teaching in different places, and you actually mentioned earlier that I was a teacher in YULA boys and YULA girls, and that was true. I had many years of great, every day there was a joy. Now I have the privilege to be teaching in a different school in Mahon, Beis in Los Angeles, and I'm no longer in YULA. But over the years teaching, one of the things that I found meant the most to students is when they felt seen. I don't know how to say that word properly, because it sounds like a new age thing to say. But when a person is appreciated and they feel like their rabbi like appreciates them and sees them and knows who they are and values them for who they are, that's what it meant when it says to find a friend to reveal your secrets, that they can just see you for who you are and say, you're beautiful, you're wonderful, you're an amazing young man, you're special, your soul is shining through. And when a person feels seen and valued and appreciated, it helps them develop their own sense of identity, their own sense of worth. Not just for young people. At any stage in life, it really matters to us what people think about us. The love and appreciation and good feelings of the people who we admire and we care about is one of the most important pieces of currency in a person's life. Do people respect me? Do people care about me? We were built for them. And so when we build a society where relationships are strong, people feel respected, people feel valued, then we give people the tools to really contribute and to really, when a person walks into a shul and feels like the rabbi, the other people there are happy to see me. They like me. They're glad I'm here. And it can't be fake. It's got to be real. That is such a gift. It's such a healthy place to be when a person feels that way. And if we can try in our societies to do that, to make eye contact with someone and smile at them, and if we don't know their name, to ask their name and like actually make a mental note to try to remember it somehow. That is so valuable. It's so real. It's one of the greatest mitzvahs in the world. According to Hillel, it's something that the entire Torah stands on, with everything else being commentary. So I appreciate the opportunity to discuss these topics and to think about them and to turn them over. And, I don't think I have all the answers, but it's a great thing to talk about. And the more that, if I got something wrong, yeah, I probably got a few things wrong in here, but I think there's also some nuggets that are worthwhile for us to consider, because this is what it means to be a descendant of Avram Avinu, to see other people, even the wandering stranger walking by with beautiful eyes, and to want to give to them and to want to connect with them. That's really what's going to make the Jewish people and the whole world what we want it to be.
Yeah, Rabbi Shoff, thank you so much for your inspiring words and Divrei Torah. And I guess no better time to start doing this and putting ourselves into this with the Chagim coming up and the Yom Tovim coming up and New York coming up. And we wish you tremendous Hatzlacha, and you should continue to go from strength to strength, from Chayil to Chayil. Thank you so much for today's discussion. Thank you.
Amen. It was a great honor to be with you. May you continue doing such beautiful work and spreading important ideas in a respectful, open, beautiful way. Thank you.
Thank you.